We're joined now by former Bank of France official, Gilles Moec, co-chief European economist now at Deutsche. The interesting thing was that the left didn't do as well in this first round, and therefore you could almost argue that what you see here is a sort of step change by everybody to the right. For that, yes. Hollande goes to the centre, Sarkozy goes to the right.
Yeah, it's probably the conclusion from last night's results in the sense that the radical left came up at roughly 11% of the votes. That's probably a bit lower than the latest polls would have suggested. It's not high enough for the radical left to really have an impact on the policies that any socialist government would actually take. But the interesting thing is that yesterday the radical left candidate immediately supported Hollande, which means that they don't need to get into negotiation. Hollande doesn't need to give anything to the radical left, so he can actually afford to move slightly to the centre to try to capture the votes that went to the centrist candidate Bayrou. At the same time, Sarkozy will probably try to move further to the right to try to woo electors from the National Front. So yeah, we should see probably a general shift to the right in the campaign themes.
What are the policy implications of that?
Actually, for Europe, it's probably a positive. Assuming that Hollande is elected on the 6th of May, simply because we've had already a change in pattern from Hollande. At the beginning, it was very tough on the fiscal compact, saying that he would renegotiate it, and this, of course, irked Angela Merkel. Now he's talking of complementing the fiscal compact with some sort of growth initiative. And that's not actually very far from what the Social Democrats say in Germany, and Merkel needs to take into account what the Social Democrats say. So if you now that Hollande will probably move towards the centre, it makes the resolution of some of the European issues probably easier.
One of the things that both candidates have done is point fingers at the ECB.
Yes.
Does that stop now? Does that carry on now? Because Angela Merkel hasn't been happy about that.
Actually, what's interesting is that there was some kind of implicit agreement between Sarkozy and Merkel to stop talking about the ECB. This has been brought again in the campaign in the last few weeks by Sarkozy himself, actually. Yeah. It will probably continue on this because it's a fairly popular theme with the National Front electorate. But I would really ascribe this to late campaign heat rather than any real sense from any of the two contenders that they can actually get that far from Germany. They know it's a taboo.
Are the Dutch going to lose their AAA rating?
Well, if you apply the same criteria as the ones that have been applied to the periphery, yes, normally it's something that is now possible. I think, again, politically speaking, it may be part of a gradual shift towards the centre-left in core Europe, whereas the periphery is actually moving to the right. And this probably helps actually to some extent to deal with some of the pending issues in the euro area if what we have is gradually a more growth-friendly interpretation of the fiscal compact rather than the pure literal interpretation that was very much predominant a few weeks ago. I mean, if Netherlands moves away from its extremely tough view of the fiscal compact, it actually helps the periphery quite massively.
Opens the door a little bit. You bring up the issue of growth. I looked at the PMIs this morning and I'm worried about growth.
Yes. Well, I mean, we've spent the entire last week looking at politics, so now we shift back to the data. If you believe, the models we use, that is actually consistent with a contraction in GDP in Q2 of probably -0.2, -0.3. It's not catastrophic, but it's just a reminder that we are in a situation of recession and that no one is actually really in position to totally escape this. And we've seen this with the German number. I mean, manufacturing in Germany is really now...
the services was okay, it was manufacturing that was the problem.
Yes, and if you look at the current level of the PMI manufacturing in Germany, it's as bad as what it was in 2009. And that should also be a reminder in terms of strategy as to what is currently needed in the Eurozone, and that probably, again, fuels into this idea.
Does the ECB do anything with this?
Not at this stage. I don't think that... at this stage, they had already priced in probably a shallow recession, so we are still in this kind of environment. It's probably at the low end of the range, but it's still a shallow recession. I think that from the ECB's point of view, what matters is credit dynamics now. We'll have on Wednesday actually the release of the bank lending survey for April. That will be a very strong indicator. Basically, I think the ECB has written off the first half of the year. What is important to them is whether or not we see in the surveys, especially in this bank lending survey, a sense that credit origination to businesses, to households, could actually accelerate a bit in the second half of the year, recover a bit. And this is really the concern.
I look at the bank data. You can't. There's no way you can look and say there is a strong uptick in credit origination coming.
For the time being, there is no question.
It's going the other way, in fact.
Well, not really. Actually, when you look at the figures for credit origination, it was abysmal in the last few months of 2011. It continues to be negative in January and February, but not as badly as in Q4. And it's a bit arcane, but basically what matters in terms of domestic demand for the Eurozone is not the first derivative of credit, it's the second derivative. What we need to see is that we can still be in a situation where credit continues to slide. What matters is the pace of this decline.
Gilles, always nice to see you. Thank you very much indeed for coming and seeing us. Gilles Moec joining us from Deutsche Bank.